As the smell of the freshly sprouted flowers bloomed in the newly warm breeze, the yellow glow of the sun shined through a tiny window on an unseen cottage on the face of a little stuffed rabbit that sat on a dresser full of dolls. "It's time to pick another," the sun whispered. "My word, has it been a year already? I wonder who it'll be this year that I do." The green grass absorbed the moisture from the newly melted snow. "It's time, my little bees," the sun said to the glow, to the yellow bumblebees near the flowers. Not saying a word, the bees agreed, diving down from the trees. Honey doesn't make itself. The purple rabbit flew high on its kite, both eyes watching the people below. "I can't believe a year had already passed that I don't." Its hair now fading to white. "How am I supposed to know who can handle such a big task?" The people minded their days and the duties and business as usual, running about. The kite was so high they wouldn't see it if they tried. He knew he never did. This calmed the youngster, whose green eyes made him feel as if he was walking right next to them below. He followed the breeze where it leads, steering only little bits, and someone caught his eye. A man chased his hat. A lady walked a dog. They seemed nice enough and willing to help, but they were just not right. He needed someone like his his eyes gazed over with daydreams, dreams that now seemed like eons ago, a whole other life, a person he had forgot even existed, like the large purple 2 foot tall, now turning white bunny had hopped in. I was. A gleam drew him back. There, down below, was a young girl running track. He could see how effortlessly she pushed herself around her other classmates. Too sweet a day like today, the pulling the kite under him, transforming it into a cloud as he watched the dream return. "Hey there, it's that time of year again, that it is." The boy turned his head from the buzz saw, taking his hands away and his foot off the pedal, only to find no one there. He tilted his head and his eyes, taking off the earmuffs. That wasn't a dream, he thought to himself, when he felt a tug on his pant leg from below. Jilly Jane was 9 years old, a middle school student, who, who referred to herself as Jilly because it sounds like silly and reminds her of Jello. It was full of good karma, and everyone knows the more you have, the more you can give. She's been running track since fifth. There's something about the blur streaking past her that made her feel right at home. The rabbit woke from his dream, a dream of all the things he used to build with wood, toys and trinkets, couches and tables. There's a lot to be said about wood and fabric, and once upon a time it was the most important thing in his universe. The little, once almost fully purple rabbit lifted up and found the biggest cloud he could. "I forgot how much work I still had to do, that I did." The bunny rubbed his paws together, and the 2 bracelets on his wrist started twinkling. The left was a pastel-colored rainbow beads, and the right a chocolate and cream-colored beads. They both split apart and began circling around the Easter bunny, and shot to the cloud he had chosen. The final bell had rung, and the school door swung open, turning the moment earlier of quiet to an overwhelming buzzing stampede of the children's freedom. Jilly talked with her friends, keeping pace with the other children not to get ran over. Then, as if in slow motion, right in the middle of her friend's sentence, Jilly saw a reindeer, blowing color back into a once black and white flower. Her eyes blinked as the deer ran off, leaving a perfectly normal blue flower with green stem and 2 green leaves. The group hadn't noticed, not slowing for a moment. She figured it must have been something she ate and pushed herself too hard. Must have caused some kind of delusion. She should definitely tell her parents to take her to the hospital. In any case, she'll check it out later after her friends had gone in. Raya was always the first to get dropped off, and her parents made her do homework before she could think. Jack and Jamal ran off when the guys called them to their house. And as she turned her head from Sarah closing the door, Julie watched a pack of baby yellow chicks that appeared to be carrying satchels and pumps. Wide-eyed, she ran to the yard's fence to get a better look around the corner of the neighbor's home. Nothing but blue skies. Julie turned her head around behind her, and a hedgehog was pulling away from a patch of beautiful green grass he had just put color back into. That takes it, smacking her fist into her palm, startling the elderly couple that was passing by. With a birthday party exploding in her eyes, she leered the direction the little chicks might have gone. The most color is, she wondered, and she was off, darting towards the gardens in the park just up the road, never noticing the flock of little yellow chicks painting with paint satchels flying perpendicular behind her. Hours passed, the garden was abuzz, and the streetlights came on, meaning she was late and still had homework and chores to do, or else she'd be grounded for the whole weekend. That's not going to happen, now with the sky falling and all. John looked down and found a young girl tugging his pants leg. "Are you the real Easter Bunny?" she asked. She was no more than 6. One of his neighbors, he thinks. She wasn't there a moment ago, and all that faded to nothing long before he could find the words. What? Shaking his now jarring head as if his hair weighed a ton, pulled with the shaking it off feeling. Her eyes were as big as his teeth-filled smile. Looking up his head, he stared at the strange child, half wondering if he should find her parents, when he noticed something in her eyes. Something purple was above his head. 2 long ears that looked like rabbit ears. As slowly as the moment passed in his eyes of the particular little girl, his hands found their way to the top of his head, and like a kid who had just looked under his own bed, hearing the boogeyman whisper something to him, he closed his fingers around the warm, fuzzy boogeyman. This is not wonderful. Something's really wrong. That there is, he heard himself say. His eyes dropped as low as his jaw cringed. He had to get a mirror, some real reflection. He was dreaming, probably hurt himself on the saw. He darted to the door of his home in the back of the garage. He watched his hand reach for the doorknob, only as it was about to make contact, it went straight through. Both hands moved lightning, one after the next, viciously scratching through the doorknob as they slammed into the door, and scratches became silent, pounding against it. He gave it all his might, and the door made no sound. He turned to the child, remembering the rabbit ears, and shot out of the garage door at top past speed. The girl whose eyes never left him. He flew to the window, where the creature was waiting for him. He twisted him around his head as he ran back into his workbench, putting his hat on awkwardly on top. His hands began shaking. "Mom," he yelled. The hat didn't fit. He adjusted the fit-all ball cap. "Mom! Dad!" he screamed, turning to see more kids had arrived and were talking to the girl with disbelief on their face. He ran out of the garage to the other door and window, and nothing, until one of the older boys had pulled his hat off his head. Their eyes were as big as his were, and they all sat there quietly as the assault on the house. He ripped the hat from the limp hand. What? You never seen a purple rabbit ears on a? He faded out. That I did. He put it back on and ran away. The kid's eyes were so wide he couldn't move. See, the girl smuggled. I told you he's the Easter Bunny. Jilly found her homework, did her chores, and got ready for bed. She wondered what she was seeing was real. How could it be? It had to be, she whispered to herself. The lunch, the lunch today, that was it. I thought it had a odd taste to it. That did it. That did it. Lesson learned, I supposed. Don't eat old food. What was that, honey? Her mom called through the door. Nothing, Mom. Just a bad stomach, I guess. Want me to bring up anything? No, no, thank you. Good night. Night, hun. Jilly walked to the window and looked at the street. She opened her window to let the fresh air in. Her mom loves keeping it freezing. The air felt so good. The warm and sweet smell fell in like a kind of dream. The kind of dream you wish you had. Sugar plums dancing and such. She placed her hand on her cheek when she realized that wasn't lightning in the big cloud. Her eyes focused, looking harder and rubbing. Bright bursts of purple and pink, orange and yellow, burst out from inside the enormous pile of moisture. Pollution's a bigger problem than we think. Mom! John ran for his sanity, to no avail. What is this? He screamed. Some kind of joke? The kids must have told their parents about it. That they did. And what is that? I don't talk like that. I must be dreaming. Pinching himself. Ah! They were they were everywhere. He had to stay hidden. They definitely talked. I acted so too strange at the start. If I'd only blew it off, I could have acted like, sure, just trying. Driving back around the corner, he just turned before diving into the bush to avoid being seen. A pack of kids. He sat there quietly. As soon as he headed out, an adult walked past from behind him. I guess it's not strange for a 15-year-old to jump into a bush. To him, I was like a 5-year-old anyway, that I am. Dang! I gotta stop talking like that, putting his hands on his face, hearing the kids walk by. No, to his dread, patting his hand on his face. Wake up, wake up, wake up. This isn't real. This isn't real. This can't be happening. He sat there and felt the furry cheeks and whiskers, even the bunny nose and buck teeth. Why? He shouted, falling in between his knees, when the worst thing ever. He heard the little girl's voice in the distance. He's over there. Hey, I heard him over there. John darted out of the bush so fast the world turned into a blur for a moment, until he slammed to a stop, nearly running over an old lady, who, dis- who despite his surprise, she didn't skip a beat. It was as if he wasn't even there. This affected him for only a moment, that the intruder was far off by the sound of her voice. There it is, a boy shouted, pointing at him, who now had the white puffy tail and felt shorter. He darted around where the lady was supposed to be, and right in the middle of the others, who hadn't even noticed, as if he was a ghost, and continued walking through him. Turning to see her, He watched the young girl from earlier, acknowledging with a smile and a point. Julie walked, Julie walked, woke up at the window. The air was cool, and her neck hurt. There it was, the same cloud, sitting there exactly the same, as if it were a mountain, standing there since they moved in. And she swears she could still see the colorful blasts of light. After getting dressed and walked outside, there it was, a newly stubbed toe. And after the events of yesterday, she was glad it was Saturday. Seems like a good direction to me. It was a day like she never experienced, and doubted anyone had, except for the crazy people. There were baby chicks everywhere. It seemed to be as if every time she noticed a different color, two yellow chicks would pull up, one holding a satchel as the other placed a straw against the color, and it was after it had begun pumping out the color, leaving only gray plant or object. She wondered why she could only see the desired color pour out of the nozzle. She walked down the cartoon high feeling highway. It felt a bit like Mary Poppins chalk drawing, except that the zoo must have exploded instead of being a barn. She watched possums, mice, weasels, even otters and woodchucks following behind the speedy chicks, blowing color back into the gray apparatuses. And then another bird chirped over a gray plant, and at her and of her animal fast behind finishing the cover up. The sun drifted into her eyes like little bubbles of light. She was lost. How could she be lost? She was walking so slow, down the same path she takes every weekend. The confused 9-year-old stood in the center of the sprawling yellow wheat field, which wasn't anywhere near her house, or her state for that matter, that there wasn't. The sun drops floated along the sky in the winds, glistening off the wheat. She never realized that not only was she a foot shorter, but actually had two yellow protuberances on her head, moving like the wheat. Julie turned around and headed back in the direction she came. It was beautiful the way the sun danced with the weaving hills, making her very nervous. She hadn't walked this far, though, this field to get where she had, and decided to make her way up the last hill to get a better view. But as she watched the clouds move up, as she did, the meet up with an enormous green hill, so much bigger than the one she was on. Her eyes followed the unusually wavy road down the Colossus, and there at the bottom was a purple rabbit. And for the first time since this weird weekend had started, Julie realized it was almost Easter, and she might be looking at the real-life 2-foot-tall purple Easter bunny. On the contrary, sweetie, the bunny spoke calmly from afar. Every year it's different, and this year's yours. Your ears say you'll be yellow. Still walking closer, she placed her hands on her ears and realized that's not what it meant, and her face expression dropped. She had ears, big yellow rabbit ears. Of course, this made her stop dead in her tracks. That it is, she said calmly. I was wondering where that came from. The Easter bunny's foot lightly tapped as he giggled. He explained everything as they walked up the cobblestone, wavy road, from the bees to the trees, and how it would be her responsibility next year to pick the true Easter Bunny. His hair was mainly his hair was mainly white now, and she had approached the wrought iron fence with stone supports. The lanterns lit, the gates opened. Unlike the last hill, she could see anything past the gates, except the clouds and the glow of the orange fires in the lanterns. But wait, I'm only 9, she stopped. I can't leave for a whole year. My parents probably already called 911. Yes, that they would. But the little sheep who found me said his shepherd built your stopwatch and it fixes everything itself. That it does. I don't. Feeling in her pocket. Oh, a new pocket watch. Well, more patch than pocket had appeared on her shirt. She lifted out the golden watch when he said, the sheep called it something or other. It's what allows you to do it all in one night. Julie opened the clock, and well, it was a clock, but at 12 o'clock for a white and red sliver between the 4 and 5 and 8 and 9 spots. It looked like a stray candy cane. She closed it and put it back in the green patch pocket where it did come out. Well, where did it come from, and how? Your tail, of course, cutting her off. We're already late, and I've got a lot more to explain before your trip. Follow me, as he began hopping into the air as if it were still on the ground. Hey, she shouted. However am I supposed to follow you? I can't fly. You got the tail, right? She felt, to be sure, making her feel uncomfortable, as it was actually there. Not only does it make you lighter than air, it lets you stand on it. Turning back, continuing on his way to the monstrous cloud. Before she took the first step, she reached up and felt the ears again, only this time she had pulled them down to take a look for herself. And as her hand approached her sight, 2 shining, almost glowing yellow, furry bunny ears were in her hands. Now she could feel her hands through the ears. They were warm, and as she leaped for the first step, she shrank another 2 inches from her head to her toes. Her pupils turned as green as emeralds, just as green as the fading purple Easter Bunny's eyes. He was very fast. She didn't know how slow he was really going, for her benefit. Looking up, she sees the bright colors seemingly exploding deep inside the cloud. It was definitely as big as a mountain, because as they landed on it, she realized she was now staring at an entire mountain range. Oh, hey, wait up! They traveled around a few of the formations until it came to a flat section made of soil, with an entire crop being harvested. It's a farm. Not realizing she spoke out loud. That it is? There were pink and blue rabbits wearing overalls or dresses, pulling wheelbarrows, filling the barrels and wearing aprons, and a multitude of different tool belts depending on what they were doing, she supposed. There was sugar cane and all sorts of other plants she didn't recognize, probably herbs. It's a lot of work to make Easter Day. They made their way through the fields, and as they approached the conveyor belt, the pink and blue rabbits were filling it with harvested materials. They noticed glowing flowers blossoming, floating in the distance, and as they approached, she realized they were opening and closing, letting Easter eggs out to be painted. The eggs floated like a ballet dancer, in the waves, never touching the ground. They watched the eggs find an open spot on the long wooden table where an army of yellow chicks sat painting them. From there, the conveyor belt spread out towards a bunch of factories along both sides of the single road. The air became full of chocolate and marshmallows. Every factory along the road appeared to be open. You could look in and see the armies of rabbits making their parts, all dressed accordingly. A highway of bumblebees brought in the honey, and birds carried the empty plants containers to its own factory attached to the chocolate factory. Julie, Julie watched the bunny drop its safety mask and start the machines. The equipment shook and rattled, mixed and matched, creating the wrappers for the chocolate. The Easter bunny bumped her shoulder. The humans can't even do that yet. They only use the wrappers for decoration. The factories flashed and jiggled, making everything you need. Jelly beans, Peeps, chocolate bunnies, Reese's, everything you need on Easter Sunday. It was amazing. She didn't know what to think, let alone say. They come into a when they went into a telescope building at the end of the line on the left. They walked in. They walked inside and found dozens of chicks looking through dozens of lenses, then writing something down. What are they doing? More work for Santa? Thinking about the candy cane marker on her stopwatch. The now fully white-haired bunny hopped over to one of the lenses and stood on two legs. He was much taller now. Her expression must have given it away. No, my dear, you're just much shorter. Julie looked down and realized she had become a tiny yellow rabbit that stood only a little over a foot tall. How she missed this completely blew her mind. As she came up on the lens, she stood up and looked at the once purple rabbit, who only an hour ago was a foot shorter than she was now. A foot taller than her. The chicks are doing research for me. Take a look. Some homes don't celebrate. Some people prefer to paint their own eggs. I need to know all this stuff so I can use the eggs and make ours go further. On top of less work for our little chickie friends. Julie looked through the lens. On the right side of its baby chick, Easter bunny on the left. She watched how the lens seemed to open the roofs of the buildings, moving from penthouse all the way to the bottom floor. Wow. The little yellow chick marked its marks and moved on to the next. It was a spectacular thing. The two bunnies hopped out of the building back onto the cloud. Birds and bees, pink bunnies, little yellow chicks and factories. Everything was moving seamlessly, endlessly working. Julie turned to see the last Easter bunny walking towards the end of a few conveyor belts that were now filled with seeds that had fell off the end into the very barrels that were used to bring in the crops that made the seeds. And one after another, a pink or blue bunny walked over and picked up the hand jack and collected the barrels. It's a pretty self-sustaining place, that it is. That it is. The bunnies take the seeds back to the fields where the birds have used their talons to aggregate the soil. That's why those little hands looks like the crow's feet. She was hopping in place. This was so exciting. I can hardly wait. When do we leave? When do we do? That now, not we. This is the end of the line for me. Soon I'll sprinkle away and leave you all the knowledge of Easter to pass to the next year. No, wait, why? How am I supposed to handle all this? Don't worry, Easter Bunny. The Easter Bunny chose you. She watched a rabbit twinkle, becoming invisible, and turn into a teenage boy who waved and smiled, vanishing at the light as the light came from above, shining on her that it is. The sun wasn't setting and the sun was setting and the factories were finally shutting down. The last of the seeds being planted, remaining naturals were returning to the soil to fertilize. The last of the chocolate bunnies being wrapped, the last of the peeps being dipped, and all the jelly beans and plastic hair being packed into little baskets and bundles. The little yellow Easter bunny hopped to the edge of the field, back where it arrived, raised onto 2 feet, lifted its paws, and the entire town, ground and all, was woke up, shook, and began to split apart, breaking into swirls of color that began flashing inward until the light became the beads on her bracelet that had gone to her wrists, leaving nothing but a cloud and the Easter bunny. And as the last of the lights from the sun disappeared, she was off, fast, too fast, to the ground, to the yard. The pastel rainbow bracelets sent out the Easter eggs as he bounced around the house and yard, and the chocolate and cream-colored beads filled the baskets with all the chocolate, jelly beans, and plastic grass you could need, like the factories had prepared. She had no walls at all. She knew to, she knew how and where to hide the eggs. Some wanted them inside, some wanted them out. Some don't eat chocolate, some can't get enough. It raced the sun around the earth, flashing its region and jumping into tunnels to avoid oceans and lakes, so that the next morning it would be done before church ended. Everyone was dressed up, wearing bonnets and fancy dresses, top hats and suit ties, thanking God for the time. John appeared on a cloud, feeling blue. You're not done yet. He turned to see the sheep looked who first put him on the cloud. The light shined down onto John, who in turn became a sheep, who in turn looked up towards the light and seeing the stuffed rabbit fly out of him towards the now new rabbit. Whoa! Cupid, who was under a leprechaun, and the Tooth Fairy. He saw Jack Frost and Father Time. There was Mother Nature and Santa Claus, even the Sandman and his twin, the Boogeyman. And above them all was a lamb with 7 horns and 7 eyes, who nodded as the hand of God pulled him back into his life so he didn't miss a day. The end.